So King David, could you please tell us how exactly you became king?
That's a long and circuitous tale. Believe me, it wasn't easy. I suppose the first time it even occurred to me that I would be king of Israel was when the old prophet Samuel appeared at a meal with my brothers and I and my father, and in front of them all, he poured this flagon of oil over my head. It was really messy, dripping down my face and my clothes. And then he announced before my brothers that I was to be the king over all of Israel. Now, I was the youngest of the brothers, and you could imagine how surprised I was, and you could also imagine how many times after that I got beat up by my brothers because of this. But there it was, laid out before me. I was going to be the king of Israel, but there was one really big problem. And that problem was that Israel already had a king. King Saul was ruling as king over Israel, and the old prophet Samuel had anointed him king as well. So how was I going to be king when Israel already had a king, and when I was as young as I was? So I just kind of rolled the idea of me being king around in my head, and I thought about it, and frankly, it never really left me. There was never a time I wasn't thinking about how I was going to be king. And I remember the first opportunity I had to advance myself towards this goal was when I heard that the king's servants were looking for a musician to play before the king to entertain him and to ease his mind. And I volunteered. I happened to be quite good on the lyre, which is a kind of harp, and I practiced lots of times when I was watching the sheep, and I played for my family. So I volunteered, and I passed the audition, and they hired me to be the king's musician. Believe me, I probably wouldn't have ever volunteered for such a job if I had known what a freak the king was. He was, at this point in his life, a little crazy. I think it had something to do with a few public disagreements he'd had with the prophet Samuel. But things weren't going too well for Saul in the psychological department. And there were a number of times when he asked me to play for him because he was so horribly, horribly depressed. And I'd play for him, and a few times he actually tried to kill me. Once, he picked up a spear while I was playing, and he threw it as hard as he could in my direction, and it landed against the wall with a thwack just inches from my body. He was actually trying to pin me to the wall. Anyway, I stayed in the king's court, and I actually became quite popular. I was just kind of the new rock star in the neighborhood, and two of Saul's daughters at the same time, they fell in love with me. Can you imagine that? I was kind of a lowly peasant shepherd boy, and here these were the king's daughters. These were princesses. But that was, I'm told that I really draw people to me. I have this kind of personal magnetism that has always attracted people to me. So these two daughters, they both fell in love with me, and I saw my opportunity at that moment. If I could somehow be related to the king's family, then my pathway to being king would be pretty smooth, and there'd just be a few of the sons I'd have to get by, and I was sure I could take care of that. So obviously I was going to marry one of these women. And the younger one was frankly a little cuter than the older one, and so I refused the younger one, making up some excuse. I think I said I was not worthy to marry the king's daughter. And then, sure enough, the younger one, whose name was Michal, she was offered to me. And I grabbed up the opportunity and I married her. And the marriage didn't work out very well, but she was really nice to have around at the very beginning. And then when her father became crazier and crazier and put out a contract on my life and was sending his soldiers to look for me, well, I have to admit that Michal, she stuck her neck out for me. She had me lowered down in a basket out the walls of the castle in the kingdom, and she put some kind of a statue in my bed so that when the soldiers came to get me, she said that I was lying sick in bed, and sure enough, there was a life-size thing in there, and it gave me a little bit of time to get away, and I'm really grateful to that. Anyway, I ran away from Saul. I went as far from him as I could, way down south into the southern wilderness where it's kind of a lawless area. And I stayed there for quite a few years. But I was not passive. I was not inactive when I was down there. I was preparing my way, and I did it by two accomplishments. The first thing is I gathered around myself a band of soldiers that were loyal only to me, and I supported them, and I supported their families, and they became fanatically devoted to my fortunes. They were not Israelites. They were not interested in the political issues in Israel, but they were my soldiers. We called them David's mighty men. And anyway, the other thing I did was all of these Judean farmers and herdsmen, they were constantly getting raided by the bandits down in this area, and I promised to protect them. And I became really popular among these wealthy Judean landowners. And then I waited. Now, there's absolutely no truth to the rumor that I collaborated with the Philistines, the enemies of Israel. That's just not true. I bided my time down there, and certainly the Philistines were dominant in that region. I had to make some arrangements with them, but under no circumstances did I cooperate with them, certainly not in their wars against Israel. Those accusations are completely untrue, and I just want to quash that rumor right now. It's absolutely not true. Anyway, I stayed down there, and I just waited, and after a while, Saul had this great battle against the Philistines on Mount Gilboa, and he gathered all of his troops and his sons to make this one last stand, and I had nothing to do with that battle. The Philistines, they had wanted me to fight in that battle on their side, and I had to make believe I was crazy. I had to let the dribble just drip off my chin, and I had to just rave and lie in the dirt, and then they left me. I did not fight in that battle. I had nothing to do with Saul's death. But Saul and his sons were killed in that battle, and in the power vacuum immediately afterwards, the southern part of Saul's kingdom, the place, the Judean territory, and I am actually from Judah myself, they made me king, and I ruled as king in Judah. So I had the first part of it in my hands. I had roughly the southern third of the country belonged to me. I was king. My capital city was Hebron. I ruled there. The northern two-thirds of Saul's kingdom turned themselves over to Saul's youngest son. This son was such a pipsqueak that he hadn't even gone to the battle with his brothers. And he ruled as king, but the real power behind the throne in northern Israel was not this son of Saul, whose name was Ishbaal, but rather Saul's commander-in-chief, a soldier by the name of Abner. And what a soldier he was. And so Abner actually ruled the northern kingdom and just had this Ishbaal up front as a puppet. Anyway, I just kept my ears open. And after a while I heard that Abner and Ishbaal weren't getting along very well. And so I sent my emissaries up and I negotiated with Abner. And I made a deal with Abner, and I had nothing to do with what happened afterwards. In fact, it came as a complete surprise to me. But Ishbaal was assassinated, and Abner turned his loyalties over to me. And at that point, the elders up north, they came to Hebron to see me, and I knew exactly what they were seeing me about. They wanted me to be their king. They wanted to do it bloodlessly. They saw the handwriting on the wall, so to speak, and they were going to make me king. And let me tell you, I really rubbed it in. I made them wait outside my throne room for hours. I made them come in on their hands and knees and do obeisance to me before I'd even let them give me their petition. And then, sure enough, they asked me to be their king, and I consented to be their king. And that was probably the greatest moment of my life. 15 years I waited from the time that old prophet Samuel had anointed me king. 15 years I waited while that other guy, that madman, was on the throne. 15 years I played my cards close to the chest, and I took every opportunity I saw available to me and even made some opportunities. 15 years, and now those northern elders on their hands and knees, they're begging me to be king. That was probably one of my finest moments.